Hi everyone, and welcome to this discussion around ViDA, or short for VAT in the digital age. My name is Max, and with me I have Heikki, CEO of Maventa, and we're going to look at the backgrounds of ViDA, the regulatory frameworks, and also a bit on the different opportunities it might bring to companies. And I guess when we talk about ViDA, you often hear it talked about as a compliance requirement, something that companies will, so to say, have to deal with at some point in the future. But the more we've discussed this with different stakeholders like CFOs, CIOs, compliance leads, software partners across Europe, the more it becomes clear, I think, that ViDA is not a threat. It's really a transformative shift in how VAT and transactional data will move across the EU. But as said, when people hear ViDA, they maybe often picture another tax directive, but it really is much broader. A complete redesign of how the VAT data will be transmitted, validated, and reported. But if you were to give us a practical definition of ViDA, what does it aim to change at the EU level?
Yeah, thanks, Max. And, first of all, the practical perspective is, in my opinion, very important, because if you think about especially SMB companies, there are entities that are led through their finances and cash flow. So the practical perspective is important. And what's going to happen is that really the paper and PDF invoices, they will be history as time goes forward. And 1st of July 2030, every invoice sent in and received will be an EN standard invoice across Europe. And also EU aims to have something called a digital reporting requirement, or DRR, which digitalizes VAT and makes VAT reporting real time or near real time. And ultimately, all companies across EU will be in this influence.
Yeah.
And there will also be a one single VAT registration, meaning that companies only need to register their VAT once when they are doing intra-EU trade. And therefore it creates or lessens the burden of VAT reporting across markets. And then there's this bit of a specific requirement for platform companies. So that means companies that are working in the accommodation and or ride-hailing industries, and these will become responsible for collecting and paying for VAT in the future.
Thank you. And I mean, ViDA moves Europe really towards the real-time, or as said, near real-time transaction reporting. What is it that fundamentally changes the invoicing and VAT landscape because of this?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, how I view this is that we're really witnessing the first compliance wave that is going to be sweeping over Europe. Every country is releasing their own e-invoicing mandate. And with those mandates, all the companies need to, in the future, either send or receive or both e-invoices. And as I said, this is the first wave. Yeah. And in the second wave, we will see the near real-time transaction reporting, or real-time, as you mentioned. And that will be built on the invoicing infrastructure.
Right.
And this is now the actual digitalization of VAT by the tax authorities across the EU. Mm-hmm. And, nowadays there are, of course, sad to say, bookkeeping and reporting frauds. Yeah. And they are committed by malicious companies with malicious intent. And in extreme cases, it can take multiple years before these malicious parties are brought to court, basically.
Yeah, brought to justice.
Yeah, brought to justice, exactly. And this will be changed because the near real-time reporting gives the tax authority the opportunity to actually get a grasp of these quicker and then also bring them to justice quicker. And of course, the society benefiting from this because there's less fraud, and also the tax money is also then channeled to the right places in the society. And who knows, it might be even that the tax burden of the companies as a result decreases somewhat. But we shall see whether the tax authority still has use for those funds as well.
Absolutely. So definitely a significant shift with massive effects hopefully coming up in the future.
Certainly.
Yeah. But of course, when we discuss with finance and compliance teams, for instance, ViDA usually, I think, evokes two kinds of reactions: curiosity and uncertainty. And depending on which it evokes, it tells you quite a lot about where the companies are on their own journey when it comes to the topic. What would you say are the most common questions or maybe concerns we hear from finance or software teams whenever ViDA comes up?
Well, it's basically what does this all mean and how do we make this happen? And of course, when do we need to make this happen? And it can be actually difficult for companies to understand that what are the exact requirements of the new legislation. And of course, we are at Maventa, we are working to give that information to companies in the right time and in the right place so that they can make better decisions on their future. And at the same time, we also see that companies are entirely new to e-invoicing. So there can also be these a lot of these unknowns. So meaning basically that the companies don't know what they don't know. Yeah. And therefore, it's very crucial that the businesses get the right information from trusted sources. And, in the end, they want to be compliant without really giving up too much of the business critical development otherwise. And for many companies, this is actually a very hard nut to crack. And this is exactly the reason why we have put in a lot of effort to create, at Maventa, a lot of effort to create a smooth onboarding process, for example, so that companies can save that valuable time in becoming compliant and at the same time also making sure that the business keeps the competitive edge. And when we were talking about the waves, the compliance waves sweeping over Europe, and after the compliance wave, there will be also a second wave where companies are going to be thinking that, okay, we built this automation, what's going to happen next, And it's a lot about turning this compliance thing into actually a competitive advantage. And it's really about, shifting the paradigm to a different position and not viewing it as something that we have to do, but as something that actually has opportunity in it.
Absolutely. And of course, the sooner companies start to prepare, hopefully they are already, but still the better, because even if it's a multi-year project, it will have real implications and it requires that thought and taking it into account in your strategy. And I think another aspect that we emphasize in almost every ViDA discussion is that it really isn't just a compliance burden, but for a lot of companies, both software vendors and so-called end-user companies alike, it's really an opportunity to modernize, and they have lots to gain from it. But maybe looking at the software vendors first, from their perspective, like ERPs, accounting systems, e-invoicing operators, what would you say are their biggest opportunities?
Well, to me, it's definitely that they should be acting fast and they would be providing their customers with the right information, in how to navigate all this, the legislative jungle, basically. And this is an opportunity for every company really to stand out. And if you think about it more broadly, it's also a definition of a forerunner company. A company that is able to help their customers in this way, they're a forerunner. And, they're following their time proactively and helping their customers out. And these forerunners, they first provide their customers with compliance-ready solution. That's the first step. And while doing that, they are actually also in the background all the time working already on the next step, how to bring the added value on top of this. And this is really like a crucial thing to understand. the ViDA train, it doesn't stop to the compliance train stop, but everybody will be back, looking for more. Mm-hmm. And there will be opportunities to capitalize on let's say, accounts receivables management. There will be opportunities in accounts payable management. And having the right kind of invoicing provider is in my opinion, crucial. Because this kind of invoicing provider can also help you out with communicating all these important matters to your customers. And at Maventa, for example, we are working a lot on consolidating this knowledge from the markets and always creating these new opportunities for further value creation for our clients.
Yeah, so definitely a lot to keep up on. And of course, for the end-using companies, it can help them immensely to have a trusted partner to work with on that front. But then if a vendor integrates once with a compliant multi-country API, how does that change their scalability?
Yeah, that's a great question again, Max. So I'd say that especially if the company is a global first or international first company, they should be looking for a provider who has that capability to serve them across the markets. Because, the executives of such companies, they don't really want to be worrying that, how does the basic plumbing work? And, what do we need to do? Who do we need to contact and source from? But they just want to have one solution that then serves them across the markets. So that's really, really important. And this, of course, creates this scalability for the business for the time to come. And then again, even if you are not going global first, that you're first, looking for local growth, then I'd say that it's still important because you never know what is going to come in the future, and having the option to scale. That's already very valuable to have. And also now thinking about the way that the provider that is consolidating multiple markets to one API, what they're actually doing is that they're also keeping up with the legislation for all those markets. So they are actually more aware what will be the requirements going onwards. Because in the end, we are talking about EU-wide legislation changes here. Yeah. So it might be that in the future there's something that comes along the way that actually this multi-market player is more better in providing this service. So, in my opinion, having multiple markets API actually gives this competitive edge in the game, and competition is tough out there, so you need all the edge that you can get.
Absolutely, and it also gives you really good readiness, because for many companies, also in my discussions, I see that they might be working with just a local market or maybe a neighboring country, but they might have plans in 2 years, 3 years, 4 years to expand, and then to be able to trust that you have all the bits and pieces in place already is really immensely worthwhile.
Yeah, it's imperative. And if you think about it, that, what if somebody gets interested about your company and they want to buy it, and they have aspirations to scale the business outside the local borders. I mean, it's very good, because it's basically extra that you can build without sacrificing anything. So definitely go for the multi-markets consolidating API.
Precisely. And then looking at the end user companies, where does ViDA create their efficiency gains?
Again, a great question. So, of course, for the sales invoice senders, the big benefits are, that you're sending the correct information out at once, and it will reach the recipient. So if you compare that to, let's say, paper invoices, for example, it's always not certain that it goes through. And it's also actually the same thing for the PDF invoices. There can be errors in there. But then when we are actually on the e-invoicing infrastructure, the information goes directly from system to system, and there's error checking mechanisms that ensure that the information is right. And all this efficiency actually translates into getting paid faster, and that helps with the working capital management, which is actually extremely important for any SMB company anywhere in the world, really. And then if you consider the invoice receivers, the gains are let's say more elaborate because there is the automation potential that you achieve with the e-invoice. An invoice, which is, as said, structured information, it can be backtracked all the way into the order, the purchase order, and then allows for automatic approval. And when paired with adequate checking mechanisms to protect it against fraud, this automation directly cuts down the cost of handling invoices and approving invoices. So it's very appealing for any company out there.
Then looking maybe at a more business-oriented question again, how can companies leverage structured invoice data beyond compliance, let's say they already talked about automation, but also analytics, maybe cash flow availability?
Especially for SMB companies where working capital management and relationships to big customers are extremely important and actually often also competing priorities, having the automation and view into the data is actually a game changer. In addition to automated approvals that we discussed, the structured invoice data works as fuel for AI and analytics. So having this full information view into your invoice data gives you the understanding of incoming and outgoing flows and allows for better decision making for sure. And being the early adopter and will allow the company to be the forerunner in this because this is new actually for most companies.
Yeah.
And in order to take those bigger steps, you need to take the baby steps first. There really aren't no shortcuts into that success. So therefore every company should be really looking at their data and also how to bind AI into that.
Absolutely. Yeah, and tying into that, I think we can really see that with ViDA, vendors and enterprises are really forced into a tighter collaboration because the quality of the VAT data becomes a shared responsibility, really. And another thing that becomes even more critical under ViDA, of course, is the access point layer. It's no longer just about sending an invoice. It's about transmitting structured VAT data reliably and staying aligned with the constantly evolving national requirements. So let's unpack the readiness angle. How prepared do in-house teams need to be to handle the compliance burden that ViDA introduces?
Yeah, I'd say extremely ready. It is a big undertaking, actually, in multiple dimensions. Let's first dissect the security, scalability, and stability, the technical sides of this matter. Security-wise, the solution must be, of course, technically hardened, but it doesn't stop there. It needs to be also process-wise very hardened due to the threat of cyber attacks.
Yeah, obviously.
Yes, and scalability, it's important to exponentially increasing loads due to the whole EU basically getting into e-invoicing, let's say in a very short time frame. And the e-invoicing, it becomes the financial backbone really for the whole EU economy. So it's a big challenge. And thinking about, for example, Peppol is getting more complex all the time. Peppol is the standard solution actually that where many companies are now looking at, and what Belgium, for example, decided to implement. So you need to keep up with Peppol. And that is not straightforward at all. You need to have all that domain knowledge, and you need to maintain that knowledge. And of course, putting that all together requires quite a bit of things that the company hasn't necessarily used to do, and it's not necessarily their core business to do at all. So there needs to be this readiness on multiple levels of the organization.
Yeah, I think that's quite eye-opening for many companies and can come as a big surprise that there really is a lot you need to take into consideration. And that bridges perfectly into the next question I have listed here for you, and that is, would you feel that running your own access point or reporting gateway is significantly riskier than under ViDA.
Absolutely. I mean, when you're running an access point, you're actually running a piece of society's critical infrastructure. And that is the sort of like magnitude of the responsibility. Everybody can understand from that or picture in their mind that if you're running a piece of the society's infrastructure, this like trust infrastructure, you need to be very aware what you're up to over there. And there will be governments that will be most likely setting fines and sanctions into failures in compliance, and of course we're already seeing that in the mandated markets. This is clear, but there will most likely, or I predict that there will be also sanctions related to fraudulent invoice flows in the network. And whenever there's a fraudulent flow, there's always one access point that has been compromised, right? So this will increase the risk. It will increase the investments into security in multiple layers of the organization. And we already saw when the EU GDPR came that the EU is serious about this, and we saw that the sanctions were also big. So it's a big deal for companies, and at the same time we have this huge technological trend of AI becoming more widespread all the time as we speak, and there will be sophisticated AI attacks against this e-invoicing infrastructure in the future for sure. And many software companies don't necessarily realize this, and that their business risk actually fundamentally changes because of this change. And that's actually also a reason why Maventa exists, because we invest big sums every year to maintain our security, stability, and scalability, and also our knowledge of Peppol and the risks associated. So this gives us the edge to keep ourselves up to date and serve our customers the best way possible.
And if we were then to look ahead towards the horizon, I mean, we can clearly see that ViDA is not a one-shot regulation. It's a multi-year transition that will reshape the European data flows. If you were to give a tip, where should companies invest now then so that they won't be playing catch-up later on?
Good question. I'd say an e-invoicing provider who is capable of adding value on top of the invoices later on. This is crucial because nobody wants to deal with switching costs later on. So you need to be there and choose the right kind of provider for yourself. And at this moment in time, I see that there are many companies who are viewing the e-invoicing trend myopically, that it's only a compliance matter, but it's actually not. And I hate to say it out loud, but they're not seeing the full picture really. There will be a phase when everybody is asking, okay, now we've built this compliance thing, and now what? Everybody will be then thinking that, okay, there is this automation potential. Am I equipped to actually take the benefits out of this system or not? And those who have picked the right player to play with, they will have an edge at that point because they don't need to start redoing their things, redoing their implementations just to get the next step going.
Precisely,
yeah. So it's really about, again, having the opportunities going forward in, let's say, accounts receivables management, accounts payable management, for example. And this is very, very crucial because by setting yourself ready for these opportunities, you're helping your customers with working capital management, and that is always important for any customer, for any company that out there. So it's really about building this competitive edge right from the get-go and not viewing it as only a pure compliance matter.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe then to wrap all of this up to a close, we can align on that companies who prepare early can turn ViDA into an advantage. Those who wait will probably experience this as a bottleneck. But from our viewpoint, ViDA really is the moment where compliance, automation, and efficiency finally converge. And the companies who lean into that will not just come out compliant, but really much, much stronger.
That's a very good summary,